For many of you, when you write your research papers, you'll use just one source per paragraph. So if you're writing a paragraph, as soon as you use that source, you want to cite it, that information in parentheses, right? And if that's the only source you use for that paragraph, that's the only time you have to cite it, unless, and you see the bolded and italicized thing here, unless you use a direct quote later in the paragraph. Anytime you use a direct quote, you are giving an in-text citation, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But if you're paraphrasing everything and you only use one source in the paragraph, you cite that source and then you don't have to cite it again. Now, some of you may write paragraphs where you're using multiple sources within one paragraph. If that is the case, what you do is as soon as you use your second source in the paragraph, you cite that source. If that second source is the only source that you use for the rest of the paragraph, you don't have to cite it again unless you're using a direct quote. However, if you switch back to the first source or you use a third source in that paragraph, you have to cite that source, even if you've already cited it earlier in the paragraph. Let's take a look at an example that illustrates what I'm talking about here. So let's take a look at this sample from a student paper. And if we look at how this student cited things, we see that she used a source, Salter 2001, right at the beginning of her first paragraph on this page. So as soon as she used that source, she cited it. But if we look further down in that first paragraph, we see that she uses a second source. This is from Field 2002. So we know that starting with that sentence right there, this also explains why children develop. That information comes from this other source, Field 2002. But what happens in the last sentence of this first paragraph? The student goes back and uses Salter again. So the student puts Salter 2001 as that citation for the last sentence of that paragraph. Because she used that first source at the end of that paragraph, she has to cite it again. And if we look at the second paragraph of this paper, again, we see she starts off with using Salter 2001, and then later on she uses Field 2002. So if we are reading this, we know that all the information starting from here all the way to here is from Salter. This information in this sentence here is from Field, and then this information here is from Salter. Similarly, Salter is cited, so we go all the way down until Field is cited. Field is cited for this sentence. So all of this we know is Salter, and then from here to here, we know that's Field. And then if we take a look at the bottom of this second paragraph, do we see any other in-text citations? No. So what does that tell us? That tells us that this information comes from Field 2002. It's a little complicated. Many of you may not use multiple sources per paragraph, per one paragraph. But if you do, this is how you want to structure those citations.